Tomorrow, House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan will unveil the Republicans' 2012 budget proposal with cuts far more drastic than the ones being debated today. And Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner warned congressional leaders today that the United States will hit its debt limit no later than May 16th. The Congress has never failed to raise the debt ceiling whenever necessary because the economic consequences for the United States and the world economy would be devastating. We now have 6 weeks to discover if this is the first Congress in history that does not understand that. Joining me now, Congressman Anthony Weiner, Democrat of New York, and Congressman Phil Rowe, Republican from Tennessee. Congressman Weiner, the Democrats have compromised beyond the point of John Boehner's original proposal of $32 billion, all the way down to $33 billion in cuts. Have the Democrats kind of been bargaining with themselves now all along, and now are you going to have to compromise even more between the $33 billion and the $61 billion that some Republicans are calling for?
Well, you know, the problem is right now there is this internal conversation going on between Speaker Boehner and himself, apparently. He agreed to 33. Now he wants to have more. He wants to tell NPR they can't be in radio, Planned Parenthood they can't be in family planning, and I guess he wants to tell the Environmental Protection Agency they can't regulate the environment. But at a certain point, you have to realize what's going on here. The straw that's stirring this drink are the Tea Party nihilists who just want the government to shut down. And, you know, one of the things about being Speaker is you've got to lead. I don't see Speaker Boehner doing that, so I think we're going to have a government shutdown, and my Republican friends are going to get what they want.
Congressman Rowe, are you happy to have the Tea Party lead the Speaker in the direction of more cuts?
No, Lawrence, first of all, you made a great intro into this segment. I thought it was terrific. You pointed out that the debt crisis that we're in, will reach May the 16th, I think you said. Mm-hmm. Your description was really good.
Congressman Rowe, as the debt ceiling approaches, are there any conditions under which you would vote against a debt ceiling increase?
You know, I think, I guess when you put it that way, yes, any condition. But I think no one, Lawrence, no one wants to shut the government down. I've looked at this very seriously, and it's not a good thing to shut the government. And I think, in all honesty, the Republican Party we were elected in November to help cut spending, and we've had some help from our Democratic allies and friends. They understand that we're heading toward an impending debt crisis. And I know you were chief of staff for the Senate Budget Committee. You understand the budget as good as anybody on television, and we can't keep going the way we're going. I don't know what's the end point if you keep spending trillions of dollars that you don't have.
Congressman Weiner, can you make an offer to Congressman Rowe right now where you think you might be able to close this negotiation?
Oh, I think so. If this was about, and Congressman Rowe's a reasonable guy, but right now we're focusing on 14% of the budget. Look, I was the author of more amendments to cut the budget during the H.R. 1 being up than any other member of Congress. Democrats don't like waste. Democrats don't like programs that aren't working. But if you take defense off the table, if you take other spending off the table and you say, let's just focus on the 14%, look, I'm going to tell you right now, if we let H.R. 1 become law, we're going to cut air traffic controllers. We're going to cut cops. We're going to cut firefighters. And just like if you're running a city, you wouldn't choose to only cut those areas. If we have a real honest discussion about this deal is very doable. But the fact of the matter is, Speaker Boehner is being dragged around by the nose by the most extreme elements of his caucus that represent the most extreme elements in this country. As soon as he shows some real leadership and says, you know what, let's try to operate in the best interest of the American people, not an extreme ideology, you can get this deal done overnight.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we have to sit down and work this out, because if the government shuts down, soldiers don't get paid. A lot of other things happen, and certainly the Democrats had an entire year last year to do a budget. There was nothing we could do to stop it. We didn't have the votes to. Our budget didn't get done, and we really are arguing about last year's budget. We're going to have to start concentrating on 2012's budget.
So, Congressman Rowe, when you say we have to sit down and work this out, it sounds to me like you're saying to Anthony Weiner, it doesn't have to be H.R. 1. It doesn't have to be the full package of cuts that the Republicans already passed in the House. It can be something between that and the $33 billion that they're at today?
Yeah, I think you'd have to look at it. And certainly one of the things that we did add was defense. Here's the thing that hasn't been brought out in this discussion so far. Discretionary non-defense spending. That's the money that we have, parks, the Department of Transportation, and so on. That is up with the stimulus money over 80% in the last 2 years. Don't tell me we can't cut the money out of there when we've had that huge increase in spending, and without the stimulus, it's up 20%. The county I live in is having to cut their budget by 5% right now because they don't have the money to pay the bills.
Congressman Weiner, your response?
Well, all I can say is fully 1/3 of the debt that Mr. Rowe cares so much about came from one place: wars that weren't paid for in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the Department of Defense, and yet we're not having a real conversation about cutting those things. Look, the fact is that Mr. Rowe will say right now, we'll debate choice later on, we'll debate EPA policy later on, let's try to get a reasonable budget right now. He might agree to it, but Boehner refuses to. They are too busy doing ideology rather than doing the people's business in the House and the Senate. And anyone will tell you that if you want to bog down this process with things like whether you're going to fund click and clack and wait, don't tell me, you can do it, and that's what they're choosing to do. I got to tell you something. Follow me now. Many elements of the Republican caucus that Congressman Rowe works with every single day want to shut down the government. They have said as much, and they're going to get their way. But when it happens, I hope every one of your viewers looks at those Republicans and say, okay, we sent you to Washington to solve problems, and you're making things worse. We're going to get rid of you.
Congressman Rowe, you were nodding in what looked like what might have been some agreement with what Congressman Weiner was just saying.
Maybe you called me off guard. We're doing.
Well, I'll explain it to you. They agreed at a $32 billion cut, which is a very substantial cut. And Speaker Boehner went back to his caucus, and he was spanked heartily by the Tea Party nuts, and now that deal's off the table. How long are we going to wait and be held hostage by this small group of your colleagues, Congressman Rowe? When are reasonable voices like yours going to finally take hold?
I would say that the Tea Party folks are very reasonable. The ones I've talked to out there, if you go meet them and talk to them, as I have, are just my neighbors. They live down the street. I've been all over the country as you have, and you talk to these folks, they understand they can't run their families like we're running the government. They can't spend more
I have
than
a
they
deal
take
then.
in.
Maybe some of your reasonable neighbors should get in the place of John Boehner, because he isn't doing the job leading right now. You can't negotiate with someone who agrees on a number and then walks out of the room, goes into your caucus, and then comes back with his tail between his legs. We need real leadership here, and it's going to be tough. And you know, I mean, I got to tell you something. If Nancy Pelosi were in charge of these negotiations, the deal would have been done a long time ago.
Congressman Rowe, you are a sponsor of the Balanced Budget Amendment Act. This would be a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
It was described by former Reagan policy advisor Bruce Bartlett this way. He says, quote, "In short, this is quite possibly the stupidest constitutional amendment I think I have ever seen. It looks like it was drafted by a couple of interns on the back of a napkin. Every senator co-sponsoring this POS should be ashamed of themselves." He's saying that you should be ashamed of yourself for sponsoring such a simple-minded constitutional amendment, Congressman. And he worked for Ronald Reagan.
Well, that's great that he did. I'm glad he worked for Ronald Reagan. But let me tell you what I'm not ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of balancing the budget as a mayor. I'm not ashamed of balancing the budget in my home. The state of Tennessee balances its budget. And we haven't never shown that the Congress of the United States has not shown the willpower to balance the budget. And I think we're going to have to put it in the Constitution so that if this particular Congress leaves and it becomes more where they want to spend more, they can't do it by law. I don't see any other way to do it.
Congressman Weiner, is there any other way to do it?
Well, having it in the Constitution doesn't stop the Republicans from trampling all over it. But let me just say this. Look, we have to get my Republican friends to transition from their successful 2010 campaign rhetoric to the idea that they're governing now. They're in charge. They've got to show some reasonableness. Having compromise is not a vice, but you've got to decide what they want to be as a party. Are they the reasonable conservative party, or are they the party that wants to put their hands in every bedroom, wants to get involved with NPR, wants to defund the EPA? That party will never get anything done in this town. And you watch, they're going to shut down the government, and a good number of them are going to be cheering all the time doing it. That's not what the American people want, and it would be devastating for our economy.
That's all the time we have for our budget debate tonight. Congressman Phil Rowe, Republican of Tennessee, and Congressman Anthony Weiner, Democrat of New York. Thank you both for joining me and having this civil discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.